Welcome back to The Explainer. Have you ever noticed how some folks can just, walk into a room and instantly inspire cooperation? Meanwhile, others are out there yelling, demanding, and, well, they're still getting completely ignored. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating dynamic that drives human motivation and dictates how we effectively communicate. It literally all boils down to one massive, game-changing difference: giving a command versus offering a purpose. Okay, let's dive into this. Think back, if you will, to the very last time you asked someone to do something. Maybe you told the kids to clean up their toys or, asked your spouse to tackle a quick household chore. Did they instantly jump to it with a big smile, or did you find yourself repeating the instruction over and over, getting increasingly frustrated because your perfectly clear directions were basically going in one ear and out the other? Look, it's a universally frustrating experience, right? But why exactly do our most direct, straightforward commands so often completely fail to get the results we're actually looking for? To really get at the mechanics behind this, we're going to look at a brilliant micro case study from our source text. I want you to picture a noisy, entirely chaotic classroom. The energy is just off the charts. Kids are talking over each other, bouncing around, and a teacher is standing up at the front, desperately trying to get some semblance of control just so the day's lesson can finally start. We're going to look at two totally different ways a teacher might handle this exact same chaotic room and check out the wildly different results they get. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is a sheer contrast in the approach here. On the left side, we've got our first teacher. They're frustrated, overwhelmed, and leaning hard into authority by shouting a very direct order: keep quiet. It's rigid, it's demanding, there's zero room for discussion. But look over on the right side at our second teacher. Instead of just barking a command, they offer this warm, collaborative proposition. They say, if we study attentively for 10 minutes, we'll do an interesting activity. Notice how incredibly different that feels. It's an invitation, not an ultimatum. Let's track exactly how that first teacher's direct command actually plays out. Right at minute 0, that loud "keep quiet" echoes through the room. The kids, well, they get startled by the sudden shout. And hey, for a second, it kind of looks like it worked. At minute 2, they're completely silent. But look at what happens right at minute 3. The noise, the chatter, the whole disruption, it just starts all over again. Why? Because demanding obedience, well, it only ever buys you temporary, super short-lived compliance. Those kids were quiet out of momentary shock, or maybe fear of getting in trouble. Definitely not because they actually wanted to be quiet. Now, let's contrast that absolute failure with the second teacher's strategy. They didn't just demand silence, right? They successfully rolled out a purpose-driven approach. They gave those kids a compelling, totally logical reason to cooperate. By promising this engaging activity at the end of just 10 minutes of focus, the teacher completely flipped the dynamic of the room. They created a shared goal. So the children didn't just begrudgingly comply, they actively chose to quiet down because they were super motivated by that fun outcome waiting for them. Basically, they were finally given a why. So the crucial point is, humans are motivated less by commands and more by purpose. I want to let that psychological reality really sink in for a second. Whether you're dealing with a classroom full of energetic kids, a team of employees at the office, or even your own family at home, barking orders almost never creates genuine, lasting change. People just intuitively push back against being controlled. It's human nature. To truly motivate someone, they absolutely have to understand and buy into the why behind the what. Let's move to and see how this builds into something even bigger, because this dynamic doesn't just stay in classrooms or offices. Let's take this powerful concept into a highly relatable and honestly high-stakes setting, the living room. Imagine a married couple right in the middle of a really tense evening. The day's stress is piling up, patience is basically zero, and communication is rapidly breaking down. How does this exact same psychology, purpose versus command, actually play out in the middle of a marriage? Our source text gives us two very different ways a husband might actually talk to his wife during this exact disagreement. Over on the left, he says, "Why don't you listen to me?" Right away, it's an accusation. It's basically a command dressed up as a defensive question. And boom, it instantly sparks an argument, putting the other person right on the defensive. But look at the right side. Instead of going on the attack, he says, "If we both talk calmly, our home will be peaceful and the kids will be happy." This brilliant little phrasing completely shifts the entire emotional temperature of the room. And this brilliantly illustrates the real-world impact of leading with purpose. By presenting a shared, highly desirable goal, a peaceful home, happy kids, the husband instantly diffuses the tension. The entire direction of the conversation completely changes. Instead of fighting against each other like adversaries, they're suddenly reminded that, hey, we're teammates here. We're working toward an outcome we both deeply care about. It completely bypasses the conflict and paves a direct path right back to marital harmony. What we're fundamentally witnessing here, both in that noisy classroom and the tense living room, is a deeply powerful linguistic shift. It is the absolutely vital transition from I to we. Think about it. Saying, "Why don't you listen to me?" is entirely self-centered, right? It's an individual demand that totally isolates the speaker. But saying, "If we both talk calmly," that introduces a collaborative, unified vision. The absolute most successful communication drops that isolated, demanding I and just fully embraces the unifying, purpose-driven power of we. Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought for you to carry forward today. When you step away from this explainer and head right back out into your daily life, I want you to think very carefully about the people you interact with. When tensions start to rise, and they will, is your next conversation going to be centered around an isolating I or a collaborative we? Are you going to demand blind obedience, or will you take a breath, step back, and offer a shared purpose? The choice is entirely yours, but as we've clearly seen today, that one simple choice changes the entire outcome of the conversation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time.